A bell rings once. A man walks quietly by, his face hidden behind a bird-like mask stuffed with dried herbs. The air is thick with vinegar and fear. Why did they trust the mask more than medicine itself? You've found histosleep narratives, where history drifts softly into sleep. Welcome. Let's drift together into stories forgotten by time. We release new stories every day, each crafted to slow your breath, quiet your thoughts, and help you find stillness. If you'd like to join this journey again, feel free to subscribe or share with someone who needs rest tonight. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And what time glows on your clock? So, before you lie down and truly relax, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what you're hearing. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk behind him, slowly. His robes rustle like paper in the damp evening air. The cobblestones are slick beneath your boots. You're not sure if it's from rain or something else. He doesn't speak. He only moves forward, the tip of his cane tapping gently with each step. The beaked mask, long and hollow, seems to nod at you once, as if acknowledging your quiet curiosity. You want to ask him, why the bird? Why the herbs? Why this costume? But instead, you follow. It's 1348. You are somewhere between Florence and Avignon, though no map can chart where you are tonight. Because this place, this journey, is less a point on earth and more a point in fear. The man turns a corner. You follow. A door slams somewhere far ahead. A dog barks in the distance. You keep walking. You pass a bakery, empty. Its windows clouded from within. The loaves on the shelf are turning green. No one has claimed them. Even the rats have gone elsewhere. He pauses at a fountain. Not to drink. He just stands there, breathing, or pretending to, because the mask isn't for him. It's for you. Inside the beak, there's wormwood, lavender, crushed rose petals, myrrh, a little mint maybe. It smells like a desperate attempt to fight the air itself, a belief that if the nose is sweet, the lungs will not rot. This was the logic, the best logic they had. You remember what someone told you? An apothecary, perhaps? Or a drunk friar? The plague enters through the nostrils, like a thief in the night. And so, the mask becomes a locked door. Historians still argue whether these masks were widely used or a later invention, romanticized and reshaped by time. But for you, in this moment, they are real. The man is real. His silence, realest of all. You step around the fountain, noticing the statue above it, once a laughing cherub, now missing a head. The man begins walking again. You see now that his robe is stained at the hem. Not blood. No, something darker, stickier. Perhaps the residue of 30 homes visited in one day. 30 pulses checked. 30 eyes closed. He is not a doctor in the way we know the word now. He is more messenger than healer, more witness than cure. He stops before a shuttered house. A red cross is painted across the door. You feel the need to cross yourself, but don't. There is a body just inside, wrapped in linen, a sprig of rosemary tucked beneath the chin. You lean in and smell the doorframe. Vinegar. Again. Always vinegar. They soak everything in it now. Cloths, sponges, even money. You remember how it started? So small. A sailor coughing on a dock. A merchant's wife too tired to finish her bread. Then came the rumors. That it was God's wrath. That it was the Jews. That it was a wind blown from the east, poisoned by the devil himself. That it was the stars. That it was everything but what it actually was. The man steps away from the house and taps his cane twice on the ground. A signal. To the gravediggers. To the watchers. To the wind. You hear footsteps behind a curtain. No one comes out. He moves again. So do you. You glance up at a second-story window. A pale face meets yours, just for a moment, before vanishing like smoke. You almost forget which century this is. The man slows now. The bell on his hip chimes once more. Some say it was to warn people. Stay back, plague doctor. Others say it was to comfort the dying. Hope has arrived, in feathers and fur. The truth? Perhaps it was just to be heard. Because in a world silenced by fear, even a bell can be a lullaby. You keep walking. The mask glints briefly in the torchlight, then disappears around another corner. And you? You follow still. You follow the bird mask down another narrow lane where shadows lean long across shuttered doors. He doesn't speak. He never does. But the street begins to murmur around you, whispers curling from broken windows, from alleyways that stink of damp wool, and something worse. The sickness has many names, but in this moment, it has none. A woman once told you, in tears, that her son died of the boil. A priest called it pestis magna, the great pestilence. A tavern keeper blamed it on the bad year. But most people simply call it the death, because calling it anything more feels too permanent, too real. You crouch beside an abandoned cart, the wheels broken, the apples scattered, some rotting, some untouched. A black cat steps lightly between them, silent as breath, tail flicking with the arrogance of something that doesn't fear human grief. You wonder, do cats understand when people disappear? You move again. The bird-masked man stops in front of a stone archway. Above it is a carving, worn smooth, but still visible. Saint Sebastian, pierced with arrows. The plague saint. They pray to him now, everywhere. Not because he was a doctor, but because he once suffered and survived. You duck beneath the arch, entering what used to be a gathering place. A guild hall, maybe. Now, only 3 people remain. An old man breathing shallowly, a young girl clutching her knees, and a friar murmuring to himself as he smears vinegar on the doorposts. No one looks at the man with the mask. No one looks at you. You notice a small bowl on the floor, filled with something bitter. Wormwood tea? No. Something thicker. You don't ask. Instead, you listen to the girl as she rocks gently and hums an off-key lullaby. She sings of saints and sparrows and summer grass, the kind of tune that might have once calmed a fever. The friar catches your eye. They say it's in the air, he says, but also in the water, and the skin, and the soul. You nod. This is the age of guesswork dressed as truth, of medicine by metaphor. You remember the doctor from last week? The one who claimed it was caused by damp winds from the Orient. He'd drawn a little diagram, showing how the breeze curved into your lungs and rotted you from within. He also recommended onions under the bed and sleeping with your mouth closed. Historians still argue whether the Black Death was bubonic, pneumonic, or septicemic. But in this world, such words don't exist. There is only death that comes quickly, and death that comes slower. You leave the room. Outside, you notice the flyers nailed to the town walls. One reads, "To guard against the plague, do not eat figs, avoid midday sun, do not mourn excessively, walk with your mouth covered, trust no traveler from the south." You run your finger along the ink. It smears. Still damp? Still spreading. You remember that a doctor once told a crowd, "The death seeks those whose spirits are weak." And the crowd applauded. Another claimed, "It's God's breath upon the unclean." And they wept. Another, drunker, perhaps wiser, just muttered, "It comes. It goes. Like the sea." A breeze shifts. A torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. The bird-masked man is standing beside a dying tree now. Its bark is cracked. Its leaves long gone. He touches its trunk with one gloved hand, as though feeling for a pulse. You realize something. He's not just visiting the sick. He's cataloging the collapse. Like a walking journal, he moves from ruin to ruin, collecting the silence. You wonder what he writes in his book, if anything. Some plague doctors did keep notes, observations, symptoms, theories. Some simply signed their name, a proof of presence, a whisper of, "I was here. I saw it too." You glance behind you. No one follows. You are alone now, but not lonely. This is a loneliness that everyone shares, a silence that has become language. The bell on the man's hip chimes again, twice this time. You don't ask why. Instead, you look up. The stars above are distant, cold, and unbothered. Astrologers say they hold the answer, that Saturn's malice and Mars' heat combined into cosmic poison. But tonight, they're just stars. Unblinking. Immune. The man walks again. You match his pace. And though he never speaks, you feel he's told you something vital. The plague has no name, because names give things power. And this already has too much of it. You wake before the sun, unsure if you ever truly slept. Outside, the city still feels paused, like it's holding its breath. The bird-masked man is gone. But a new figure waits near the gate, tugging nervously at the folds of a long robe. He introduces himself as a physician, not with a handshake, no one touches anymore, but with a gesture to his robes. Thick, dark, expensive. A symbol of knowledge. And distance. You follow him into a makeshift clinic inside a half-abandoned school. The chalkboard still bears the lesson from weeks ago. Balance in all things. Now that balance is a corpse lying on a bench. He doesn't flinch. Instead, he opens a leather-bound notebook and begins muttering to himself about bile. You hear the words like poetry carved into fear. Yellow for heat, black for cold, phlegm for dampness, blood for strength. The four humors. You've heard of them before? Air, fire, water, earth, transformed into bodily fluids. Health, they say, is balance. Sickness? A sign that your inner elements are at war. You wonder what kind of war causes a person's skin to blacken in a single day. What imbalance explains the way the lymph beneath the arms swells until the flesh bursts? The doctor sighs deeply. He speaks as though the body is a garden gone wild, overwatered, overfed, burned or frozen by excess. Too much black bile, he mutters. Melancholia breeds pestilence. Then he adds with odd certainty, the Greeks knew this. Galen knew this. You nod, slowly. Galen. The man behind half the medicine practiced here. Dead for over 1,000 years, but still dictating how your neighbors die. Historians still argue whether Galen's influence saved more lives than it harmed. But in this dim room, it's not up for debate. The physician waves a perfumed cloth beneath the corpse's nose, out of habit, not hope. Then turns to you. You look pale, he says, not kindly. He sniffs the air near your mouth, as if your breath will betray your inner tides. He asks when you last passed stool, what color it was, how you sleep, what dreams you dream. Then he declares, you have too much heat, an excess of sanguine humor. You try to remember if that's the cheerful one, or the brave one, or maybe the doomed one. He offers you advice. Eat less meat, no garlic, avoid sex and onions, take walks at dawn, and, if possible, bleed. He means it. A controlled cut. A bowl to catch what's wrong with you. To release your imbalance, like letting steam escape a kettle. You decline. Instead, you sit by the open window and watch a man outside chase his own cartwheel down the street. It seems absurd. But so is everything else. The doctor gives you a broth of lentils and something bitter. Tells you it will calm your elemental fire. You pretend to drink it. A woman enters with a child. Both are sweating. He asks the same questions. Looks at the child's tongue. Phlegmatic, he says, as though naming a breed of dog. You think about the last time anyone mentioned germs. Then you realize, no one has. That's centuries away. Here, a fever isn't a symptom. It's a signal. A confession. The body crying out in a language only the humors understand. A dog barks in the distance. You keep walking. Later, you sit beneath a painted ceiling in what used to be the library. The doctor reads from a faded scroll, quoting Hippocrates, "Let food be thy medicine." Then he bites into a pear and frowns. "Too moist," he says. You smile. Just a little. Not because it's funny, but because it's so earnestly absurd. Before you leave, he gives you a charm, dried sage in linen, tied with red thread. "For balance," he says. You thank him. He doesn't charge a coin. He only wants to be remembered. You step outside. The sun is setting, or rising. Time is strange now. You feel a heaviness in your stomach. Not illness, but knowing. That no one really understands this plague. But they try. In scrolls, in herbs, in bleeding bowls and prayers and pears. You pass another closed door. It smells like time and something else. You walk on. And somewhere behind you, the doctor dips a quill into ink and writes your name beside a list of symptoms that don't match anyone else's. Balance, after all, is hard to define when everything is dying. You hear it before you see it. A rhythmic slapping, leather against stone, stone against flesh. Then a grunt, then laughter, brief, strained. You round the corner and find the barber surgeon. He's sharpening a razor on a strip of worn hide, humming something that might have been a song once. Behind him, a boy holds a bucket filled with blood, still steaming. No mask, no robes, just a blood-stained apron and a look that says he's seen worse. "Come to be balanced?" he asks, grinning through yellowed teeth. You don't answer, but he takes it as a yes. He beckons you to the stool beside him, wobbly, sticky, cracked from too many anxious hands gripping its edges. On the wall hangs a pole, red and white striped, a sign not of candy or cheer, but of veins opened and humors spilled. You sit. He wraps a leather strap around your upper arm, tightens it, tighter still. "Good," he says. "Let the blood rise like an angry tide." You glance down. The vein swells, pulses, waits. He pulls a leech from a small jar of pond water. It wriggles, eager. He names it something ridiculous, Benedict, before placing it delicately near the crook of your elbow. It latches on like it's done this 100 times, which it has. The boy nods. He's a fast feeder. You watch. You don't flinch. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because nothing surprises you anymore. Not even this tiny mouth, stealing your blood for health. The barber talks while the leech works. "Tried cupping yesterday," he says. Glass dome, lit candle. Made the skin rise like bread. Patient fainted. Called it a miracle. You don't laugh. But he does. Historians still argue whether bloodletting helped, harmed, or simply hurried the inevitable. In this moment, it feels like theater. Ritual. Desperation dressed up as precision. The boy hands the barber a small knife, more needle than blade. "Let's finish what Benny started." The cut is fast. Warmth flows into the bowl. You count the drops. 1, 2, 3, until you lose count. The barber hums again. Wipes your arm with vinegar-soaked linen. "Takes out the heat," he says. "Too much fire in the blood brings fevers. And fevers bring, well, you know." You nod. He shows you a chart, hand-drawn, smudged. A man divided into zones. Head, heart, liver, genitals, each with its own vein, its own leech, its own theory. "Different cuts for different sins," he jokes. You realize he's not entirely wrong. Some believe that bleeding cleanses more than just the body. It purges the soul, spills out bad thoughts, bad luck, bad dreams. A candle flickers. Someone just whispered your name. You blink. The leech has dropped off, swollen and content. The barber flicks it into a jar of ash. "One use only," he says. "Don't want it getting ideas." He rubs rosemary oil into your arm. The scent chases away the metallic sting. He gestures for the next patient. You stand, dizzy, but not ill. Lighter. Or maybe just emptied. You leave a coin on the bench. He doesn't check its value. Barber surgeons aren't merchants. They're craftsmen. Of cuts, of calm, of ritual wounds. Outside, the air smells of soot and wet straw. You walk past a shuttered bakery. A chalk note scrawled on the door. Gone to be bled, may return. You wonder if they ever did. You almost forget which century this is. Further down the lane, you pass a dog licking something from the cobblestones. It looks up at you, then back at its prize. Something red. Something recent. You keep walking. Later, you hear two men arguing by a well. Too much bleeding kills, one says. Not enough, and the humor's rot, the other snaps. Both believe. Both are sure. Neither truly knows. And you? You walk on, arm wrapped tight, not with fear, but with gauze and herbs. The breeze shifts. A torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. In your pocket, you find a single leech tooth. Tiny. Harmless now. But once, it drank for you. Once, it believed it could save you. And maybe that's enough. The air feels heavier today. You pause beneath an archway as a gust of wind brushes past, carrying with it a sour tang of decay, vinegar, and something older. Not rot, not quite death, something waiting. A physician nearby waves a bundle of herbs under your nose, lavender, sage, and crushed juniper tied with twine. Keep breathing through this, he instructs, voice muffled behind a waxed cloth mask. The air is the culprit. The miasma, it rides the wind. You do as he says, because here, everyone fears the air. The theory is simple. Bad air causes plague. Not the foulness of garbage, but invisible corruption, moral, spiritual, elemental, floating freely. And so the city begins to fight the air itself. You walk through the square as workers dump buckets of vinegar into gutters, burning dried rosemary by the bale. The smoke stings your eyes. You cough. A woman presses a posy of clove and thyme to your hand. Keep it close, she says. Close to your nose. Always. You obey. Because what else can you do? This is the miasmatic model of medicine, and it's everywhere. You pass a merchant's stall stacked with satchels filled with crushed flowers, priced like treasure. Next to them, glass globes containing vinegar and mustard oil. The seller swears they purify entire rooms. Behind him, a child sneezes, and everyone takes a step back. Historians still argue whether belief in bad air was completely wrong, or just tragically incomplete. After all, there was something in the air, but not what they thought. You wander into a chapel, its windows propped open in strange defiance. A priest walks the nave, swinging a censer heavy with frankincense. The smoke coils through broken beams of light like a serpent. Sweet smoke drives out the evil fog, he says solemnly, and brings angels in with it. You watch as he lifts the censer high, then drops it. It crashes to the stone floor, scattering embers. He doesn't pick it up. He simply walks away. You leave the chapel. The air outside feels no different. The city has taken to perfuming everything now. The laundry, the walls, even the dead. A cart passes, loaded with bodies covered in lilac-stuffed linens. You catch the scent. It doesn't help. You glance up. Windowsills once held cats and candles. Now, bowls of vinegar, onions, and chopped garlic. The onions are said to draw sickness into themselves, martyrs made of bulb and skin. A dog barks in the distance. You keep walking. You approach a fountain where people gather with scented waters, bathing cloths, not themselves. No one dares open their pores. To sweat is to invite infection. To bathe? Dangerous. Foolish. Exposing the body to the wicked wind. You hold your breath as a breeze cuts through the plaza. You count to 10. Then exhale. A man nearby does the same. There's something unifying about this fear of air. Even strangers share glances when the wind stirs. You remember what an apothecary told you. The plague dances on invisible threads. You must cloud the threads before it finds you. So you buy a sachet of rue, tie it to your collar. It smells awful, but they say it offends the plague, which is apparently quite picky. Later, you visit a widow who's made her house into a herbal maze. Every doorway draped with garlands, every surface dusted with crushed mint and wormwood. She explains her theory while crushing rose petals with a stone. The nose is the gateway. Plug the gate, and the devil cannot enter. She offers you a small packet. Inside, myrrh, pine resin, and orange peel. You place it in your pocket, though you already smell like a spice merchant lost in a swamp. A bell rings again, softer this time. You turn and see the bird-masked man again, standing just beyond the fog of burnt rosemary. He doesn't wave, doesn't beckon. He just watches. Then he disappears behind a row of shuttered houses. You breathe deep through your posy. It helps. A little. Not with health, but with fear. You pass another closed door. It smells like thyme and something else. Someone whispers that breathing through silk is safest. Another insists on a sponge soaked in camphor. Another, more desperate, presses a dead frog to his lips, muttering something in Latin. None of it works. But it doesn't have to. Because when the air turns on you, even pretend protections feel real. And tonight, that might be enough. You hear them before you see them. A low drone rising, voices, not singing, not chanting exactly, just moaning syllables that blur into one long sound. Then, the slap of leather, the hiss of flesh struck raw, and the thump of feet, dozens of them, hitting stone in perfect rhythm. You step to the side of the road. The air smells of sweat, smoke, and old incense. They round the corner like ghosts or soldiers, but they carry no weapons, just whips, long knotted cords, some tipped with bone, their bare backs striped red, scabbed and cracked, some still bleeding. You count them, 20, 30, more, all in linen, all hooded, all walking with solemn purpose, like penance was something physical you could stack, like bricks, until it reached heaven. You've seen them before. Everyone has. The flagellants. Not priests, not monks, just people. Farmers, tailors, bakers, all stripped down, self-appointed soldiers in a war against sin. God is angry, someone whispers behind you, so they beat the world clean, starting with themselves. They stop in the square, form a circle, drop to their knees, and begin. The sound is sickening, but also rhythmic. Whip, breath, prayer. Whip, breath, prayer. Over and over, until it becomes a strange kind of music. A man at the center stands. He lifts a hand. The others pause. He reads from a parchment. A great darkness has entered the world, and it comes not by stars nor air, but by the filth of our souls. He lowers the parchment, lowers himself to the stone, then begins whipping again. The breeze shifts. A torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. You've heard the rumors. They walk from town to town, sometimes welcomed, sometimes feared. They refuse doctors, refuse food. They eat only bread and speak only to confess. They believe that suffering cleanses not just the self, but the world. That enough pain might pull God's gaze back to earth. You watch as one collapses. Two others pick him up, gently, like lifting a child, then set him back in line. No one cries. They only whip. Historians still argue whether the flagellant movements helped ease fear, or only worsened the chaos. Some towns praise them as holy deliverers. Others banned them outright, fearing hysteria. You walk through the crowd. A woman presses her palms together. A boy mimics the whipping motion. An old man mutters something in Latin, half prayer, half curse. You step closer. The man nearest you turns his head. His eyes meet yours. They are bloodshot, but steady. He doesn't smile. He simply nods once, then strikes himself again. You flinch, but you don't look away. Some say these men were led by visions, that they saw angels holding swords. or cities crumbling beneath plagues shaped like dragons. Others say they were just afraid, too afraid to be still, too afraid to wait for death sitting down. So they moved, bled, burned the sin out of themselves and each other. You glance down. The stone beneath them is spattered, not just blood, tears, sweat, hope, maybe. A dog barks in the distance. You keep walking. The procession moves again, down the street and into the mist. Voices rising, bodies bending, a moving storm of pain and prayer. And when they are gone, the square is quiet again. You step into the center. Your feet echo. No one follows. You pick up a fallen whip. It's heavier than you thought. Smells of iron and damp leather. You don't keep it. You place it back on the ground. Behind you, a baker starts sweeping blood from his doorstep. As if it were just another market morning. As if pain could be tidied away. You pass another closed door. It smells like time and something else. And as night comes, you wonder, how many lashes does it take before God listens? And what if he never asked for them at all? You lie awake on a straw mattress in a borrowed room. The ceiling above you is low and cracked, painted once, now flaking like dried skin. The scent of lavender sachets hangs faintly in the rafters, but beneath it, mildew, ink, and sweat. Outside, the stars shimmer coldly through warped glass. And tonight, they feel like they're watching. Downstairs, a man arranges scrolls by candlelight. Not holy texts, not medical treatises. Charts, planetary alignments, moon cycles, diagrams that trace the heavens in copper ink. You descend the creaking stairs. "Come," he says before you speak. "It's nearly time." Time for what? He doesn't answer. He only points to the window. There, pale and perfect, hangs Saturn, and beside it, the angry orange glow of Mars. The astrologer breathes deeply. "That's the cause," he whispers. "Right there, in the sky." You follow his finger as he draws invisible lines from star to star. "The conjunction was exact," he says. "March 20th, 1345, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, clustered like a fist." You nod, though you don't fully understand. "Three great malefic forces," he explains, voice rising. "Together, they tore a hole in the heavens, a wound, through which this plague poured." You sit across from him as he unrolls a vellum chart. The parchment crackles like old fire. Each symbol seems alive, stars with teeth, comets with trailing curses. Historians still argue whether medieval astrology was pseudoscience or deeply sincere theology wrapped in math. But here it's not superstition. It's explanation. It's logic. You look down at your hands. They tremble slightly. Is it the stars? Or just fear? He offers you a piece of bread, stale but edible. "Eat with your left hand tonight," he says, "to appease Venus." You oblige. Not because you believe, but because, what harm could it do? He shows you more charts, ones that predict cities burning, kings falling, blood in rivers, and skies that rain frogs. You point to one. "Did that happen?" He shrugs. "Not yet." You remember a butcher who swore the plague would leave once the moon turned red? Another who thought it would end when Venus vanished behind clouds for 7 days straight. They counted days in shadows and signs. Not in symptoms. A candle flickers. Someone just whispered your name. You turn. No one there. Back at the table, the astrologer peers into a brass sphere, armillary he calls it. You ask what it tells him. "Direction," he says. "Even if the road leads to ruin, it's better to know where it bends." He traces your birthday on a scrap of paper, pulls a feather quill from a jar, and begins sketching your horoscope. He frowns midway. "Ah," he mutters. "You have Saturn in the 6th house. Very pestilential." You raise an eyebrow. He nods solemnly. Don't worry. It just means your humors are more sensitive to celestial imbalance. You're not sure if you've just been diagnosed or insulted. Still, he hands you the paper. On it, small Latin phrases curl around your name like vines. You fold it, keep it close. He speaks of the future, of stars that might align more kindly, of omens already past. Some believe the plague is the end, he says softly. I think it's just a correction. You ask, of what? He gestures upward. Of arrogance? Of disorder? The cosmos demands balance. You glance again at Mars. It pulses red. Not just a light, but a bruise on the night sky. A bell rings again, softer this time. You stand. He presses something into your palm. A talisman. Bronze, warm from his hand. Etched with a sigil of Mercury, the quick planet. For clarity, he says, and swiftness, if you need to flee. You thank him. He doesn't reply, just turns back to his charts, already chasing the next star. You step outside. The air is cold. Your breath fogs the air. The past leans in. Above you, the heavens remain unbothered, unreachable, but still beautiful. You don't know if the stars brought this plague, but tonight, they seem to know your name, and they're not blinking. You find yourself standing in the back of a church, not for mass, not for confession, but for something far more urgent. A funeral. No, half a funeral. A burial without the full script. A priest murmurs abbreviated Latin over a hastily wrapped body. No hymns, no incense, no tears, only speed. Outside, a second cart waits, already loaded. The line behind it is growing. You step forward, then pause. Not out of reverence, but uncertainty. You wonder, did they die a good death? In this time, death is inevitable. But how one dies, that still matters. You sit near a wooden bench once used for weddings, now stained with candle wax and damp from hurried feet. A nun kneels nearby, whispering prayers into a child's ear. He's burning with fever, but conscious. Barely. She holds his hand and speaks softly. Just say the words. The soul must be ready. The soul must be ready. That's the heart of it. The ars moriendi, the art of dying well. It's not enough to die. You must die correctly. With confession, with absolution, with last rites, with your spiritual ledger wiped clean, preferably moments before your final breath. But what happens when death comes too quickly? You watch as another body is brought in. No name given, no family present, no priest touches the corpse. He simply nods. One more soul, unshriven. A dog barks in the distance. You keep walking. In the vestry, you meet an exhausted friar, face lined, hands trembling. He wipes sweat from his brow with a cloth already stained with oil of unction, the sacrament for the dying. He tells you, sometimes I only have time for one word, one drop of oil. That has to be enough. You ask if it ever feels like it is enough. He doesn't answer. Historians still argue whether the good death was a spiritual comfort or a cruel, unreachable standard. But here, in the thick of it, it is both shield and burden. You remember the story of a woman who died clutching her crucifix, her lips repeating, "Forgive me," even after breath had left her. They said she was lucky, prepared. You step into the chapel's side room. There, another friar scribbles names in a worn ledger. He pauses. Yours? He asks. You shake your head. Not today. He nods and keeps writing. Outside, the bell tolls again. Not once, not twice, but 7 times. A family. Or what's left of one. You walk to the courtyard, where rows of candles flicker low. Each one a life. Or a hope. Some are already out. A breeze shifts. A torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. You meet a woman who sells death kits from a small basket. A candle, a wooden cross, a scrap of linen, and a prayer in rough script. Cheaper by the dozen, she jokes, then lowers her eyes. You buy one. Not for yourself? Not yet. You carry it as you walk, listening to whispered arguments. He died without confession. His soul wanders now. She died in her sleep. Surely God understands. They buried him wrong. The grave faced north. Even in the grip of death, the rules matter. A priest nearby shakes his head. It used to be simple, he says. A clean soul, a quiet room, a calm goodbye. He sighs. Now, it's doorsteps, alleys, barns. We chase death. It doesn't wait anymore. You leave him, not because you're done, but because he is. You walk until the church bells fade behind you, until only the wind remains. You pass another closed door. It smells like time and something else. And you wonder, if the good death is now a myth, what's left to hope for? Maybe just this: a quiet hand, a whispered prayer, and someone, anyone, still willing to say your name out loud. You find the monastery by accident. A narrow road veers left, up through mist and pines, and suddenly you're at its gates. Thick wood, iron-studded, creaking as they open inward without a sound from within. A monk greets you. No words, just a nod, and the soft clink of keys on his belt. He gestures for you to follow. You do. Inside, the world is hushed. Stone corridors muffled by straw. Candles tucked into alcoves, their flames steady despite the breeze. The scent here is different. Less fear, more rosemary and beeswax. A place scrubbed clean by discipline, not desperation. You pass rows of wooden doors, each marked with symbols you don't understand. Latin words, herbal sketches, a few crosses drawn hastily in chalk. Then, the infirmary. Simple cots line the walls. A few bodies lie still. Not lifeless, just resting. Some coughing, one praying. A novice sits near the door, grinding something in a stone bowl. You catch the scent. Elderflower, rose hips, a hint of vinegar. He looks up, smiles. Tea for fever, he says. And for fear. You nod. You've tasted worse. They bring you to the herbarium next. Here, monks tend rows of potted plants with the reverence of priests before an altar. You recognize some. Mint, sage, hyssop. Others are stranger. Withered leaves, brittle stems, roots stained orange. One jar reads, Betony, for nightmares. Another, Angelica, against pestilence. A third simply says, Hope. You ask what's in that one. The monk shrugs. We refill it when we can. A breeze shifts, a torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. This is where the cloistered cures begin. Not with cutting, not with chanting, but with balance, with time, with silence. The abbot greets you in the apothecary chamber. He speaks softly, but firmly. Plague is both physical and spiritual, he says. So we treat both. He shows you a salve made of mustard, honey, and ground walnut shells. Then a tincture brewed with wine and crushed violets. Not a cure, he admits, but the body welcomes kindness. Historians still argue whether monasteries helped or hindered during the Black Death. Some spread the disease unknowingly. Others became sanctuaries, tiny islands of order in an ocean of collapse. Here, it feels like the latter. You help a monk roll linen strips dipped in rose water. They hang them to dry in an open cloister, sun filtering through archways onto damp stone. He says the strips are placed on the foreheads of the fevered. To remind them of gardens, he explains. You visit the scriptorium next. A single monk is copying a treatise, carefully, patiently, letter by letter. You ask what he's writing. A new recipe for basil balm, he replies. From a doctor in Lucca, it soothed a widow's cough. You don't ask if she survived. He hands you a page torn from a ruined book. On it, a small illustration of a basil leaf with instructions beneath. You fold it, tuck it away. You almost forget which century this is. Later, you sit beside a window overlooking the orchard. Another monk joins you, humming quietly. He offers you a small dried fig, dipped in honey. For your soul, he says. You eat it slowly. You ask, do you think prayer helps? He replies without hesitation. Not always in the way we want, but always in some way. You glance down at your hands, still steady, still yours. You pass another closed door. It smells like time and something else. When it's time to leave, the monks give you a pouch, dried mint, apple bark, and a scrap of parchment with Psalm 91 written in careful hand. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, it begins. You nod. Thank them. Step outside. The gate closes behind you. The world outside rushes back in. But for now, at least, you carry a little piece in your pocket. And that feels like medicine, too. You walk along a muddy road now, the monastery far behind you. Ahead, a town rises, a crooked silhouette of stone and smoke. There's a physician here, one with a reputation, not for curing, but for quoting. You find him in a dim study above a wine merchant's shop. Scrolls litter every surface. Shelves bow beneath the weight of ancient texts. A brazier smolders in the corner, filling the air with a dry, bitter heat. He doesn't look up when you enter. Sit, he says. You do. He slides a parchment toward you, yellowed, cracked, heavy with ink. This, he says, tapping it with a crooked finger, is Galen's original theory on putrefaction of the bile. He says it like scripture, like it explains everything. You nod politely. He peers at you over wire spectacles. You've come for understanding, he states. Good. That's rarer than healing these days. He begins his lecture. Galen of Pergamon, born in the 2nd century, a Roman physician, philosopher, anatomist. He dissected animals, mapped organs, and charted the human body with the confidence of someone who never questioned himself. And now, centuries later, his words still bind doctors like laws. Galen said the liver was the source of blood, the man tells you. So we act as if it's true, even when it fails to explain a single corpse in the street. You glance around. Every chart, every diagram, every diagnosis starts with Galen, not the patient. Historians still argue whether Galen's long shadow helped preserve knowledge or stalled discovery. Here, it's both. A cage, but also a candle in the dark. The doctor offers you a seat beside a wooden dummy, its chest painted with labels in Latin. He traces the intestines with a stick, reciting terms you don't recognize. He taps the chest. Here, melancholia, the seat of grief. He taps the stomach. Here, choler, the engine of fever. You ask about the plague, where it sits, what it wants. He hesitates. Then, it doesn't respect Galen. You're surprised to hear him admit it. He leans in. But if I discard him, what do I replace him with? A man must believe in something, especially when the dead keep coming. You reach into your pocket and show him the basil balm recipe from the monastery. He scans it, scoffs. Folk remedy, he mutters. No structure, no theory. You ask if theory matters more than mercy. He doesn't answer. A candle flickers. Someone just whispered your name. He sets the parchment down, stares into the brazier, then says, almost too softly, Sometimes I dream Galen walks these streets, masked, robe billowing, appalled at what we've become. He chuckles, bitterly. Or maybe he would be proud. We still invoke him, still blame imbalance, still quote him, like priests repeating hymns. You realize his devotion is not blind. It's desperate. In a world crumbling, Galen is a scaffolding of thought, not strong enough to stop the fall, but comforting in its way. You pass another closed door. It smells like time and something else. He offers you a final thought. Galen gave us a map, not a destination, and no map is perfect when the ground keeps shifting. He hands you a scroll, one of Galen's lesser-known essays. Take it, he says. Maybe it will help you understand how much we don't know. You thank him. Step back into the afternoon light. It's raining softly. You glance upward. For a moment, the clouds look like ribs. And you wonder how many people must die before a new theory is allowed to breathe. The next physician you meet doesn't speak at first. He doesn't need to. His robe speaks for him. It sweeps as he walks. Velvet, dark as dried blood, trimmed in fur so fine it looks like it belongs on a king, not a doctor. Its hem never touches mud. A servant holds it aloft behind him, like a bridal train. You watch him descend the steps of a townhouse where the shutters are nailed shut and the air smells like boiled vinegar and spoiled pears. He adjusts his gloves, goat leather, soft and spotless. Not a speck on him. He sees you watching and nods. Graciously, as if offering a benediction, you follow. The robe, the gloves, the waxed hood, they aren't just protection. They're performance. This is medicine by costume. Inside his chambers, the air is perfumed. Overwhelmingly so. A bowl of cloves and orange peel simmers on a bronze brazier. You cough. He doesn't. He sits. A servant pulls off his gloves, one finger at a time. Another sets down a silver tray with a cup of wine. Not for you, just for him. You look around. Everything gleams. Glass, polished wood, brass instruments laid in neat rows. A display of certainty. He finally speaks. You wish to understand, he says. So few do. You nod. He gestures to his robe, hanging now on a carved hook shaped like a lion's head. This is armor, he says, silk-lined, waxed, stitched with prayer. He turns slowly, showing you the amulet sewn into the seams. Saint Sebastian, Saint Roche, a tiny silver anchor. Faith must be worn, he explains. Visible, certain, immaculate. Historians still argue whether these garments were more symbolic than effective. Some say they helped. Others say they trapped more disease than they blocked. You step closer. The mask, beaked of course, rests on a mannequin bust. Inside, crushed herbs again, but also pearls. A sprig of rue. A coin stamped with a lion. You ask why the coin? He raises an eyebrow. Plague does not touch the rich, he says. Or rather, it does, but more politely. He smiles. It's not quite a joke. A breeze shifts, a torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. He offers you a robe to examine. You feel the weight. It's heavier than expected, not just in fabric, but in what it promises. Authority, distance, immunity. You understand now. The robe is not just to protect him from you. It's to protect you from seeing him as human. Because a man might falter. But a robed figure? A robed figure is medicine itself. He gestures to the mirror. Look, he says. You do. You see yourself, pale and small, beside this towering silhouette of velvet and brass. You would trust this man, he says, even if he said nonsense, especially if. You almost forget which century this is. He shows you letters from nobles, praise for his bearing, his calm, his divine composure. You ask if he ever feels fear. He pauses. Of course, he says. But I wear layers for a reason. It hides the shaking. You smile. He doesn't. You pass another closed door. It smells like time and something else. When you rise to leave, He doesn't offer advice or herbs, just a single phrase. Look the part, and the body may follow. Outside, rain begins again. Fine. Cold. You pull your cloak tighter. And for a moment, you wonder if you could be mistaken for a doctor too, if only your robe were grand enough. The pamphlet flutters into your hands like a leaf on fire. You didn't buy it. No one ever buys these. They're tossed into the wind, shoved into doors, pinned to walls already choked with notices and prayers. The cover shows a skull with a crown and wings. Underneath, in bold black ink, a most dreadful account of the pestilence now afflicting our Christian lands, with remedies sure and fast. You read on. Inside, a list of cures, none of them plausible. Garlic steeped in wine, a poultice made from pigeon droppings, the ashes of a black cat, ground into vinegar and applied to the soles of the feet. You glance around. Others are reading too. One man holds his copy at arm's length, squinting as though the text might vanish if he gets too close. A woman mutters the remedies aloud, as if speaking them makes them true. A child collects the pages to make boats for the gutter's thin stream. You fold the tract and tuck it away. Not because you believe it, but because, what if? The printing press has made panic portable. Since the plague returned, presses run day and night, not to print scripture, but cures, warnings, testimonies, dreams disguised as science. You find a wall covered in posters. Some promise salvation. Others offer maps. Safe towns free of pest. None of them real. One has a drawing of a rat being struck by lightning. Another shows a family beneath a dome of incense, untouched as corpses pile around them. You ask a vendor nearby how many copies he sells in a day. He shrugs. Enough to eat. You ask if he reads them. He shrugs again. I sell hope. Reading's extra. Historians still argue whether these plague tracts spread more knowledge or more fear, but you can feel it. The city hums with half-truths. Every whisper starts with a headline. You find a quieter square. There, a friar reads a pamphlet aloud to a group of children. His voice is calm, but the words, absurd. And if thou findest thy neighbor's breath to smell of onions, know thee this, he hath been spared. Embrace him. You almost laugh. Almost. A candle flickers. Someone just whispered your name. You turn. No one. At a nearby stall, an apothecary sells tiny printed charms. Folded tightly, strung on red thread. Words ward off disease, she says, even when they're printed. You ask what they say. She opens one. Inside, a single word repeated 6 times. Mercy. You buy one. You don't believe it works. But it might. Further down the street, you pass a group arguing loudly over a new tract. Here, this one says burning wool keeps the air pure. Wool? I heard it was vinegar and warm goat's milk. You're both wrong. It's saffron and staying indoors. You walk on. You pass another closed door. It smells like thyme and something else. In a tavern, a man recites headlines like sermons. The plague is a wind from the devil's cloak. The cure lies in the liver of a northern pike. Pestilence only strikes the faithless. People nod. Not because they agree, but because someone is saying something. And silence is worse. You sit on a step and read the rest of the pamphlet. It ends with a poem. If fever strikes and boils rise, take sage and salt beneath moon skies. Burn your shoes and kiss the floor, then plague shall darken you no more. It rhymes. That's enough for some. You close your eyes, holding the folded paper in one hand, feeling its weight, the weight of panic dressed as promise. You almost believe it. Almost. You smell her before you see her. A cloud of clove and lavender clings to the air, followed by hints of rosemary, marjoram, and something sharp, perhaps crushed pine resin. She walks through the square like a moving garden, veil over her face, gloves on her hands, each finger ringed with small silk bags. A chain of scent, strung across her body like armor. "Keep the plague at bay," she says softly to no one in particular. "One breath at a time." You follow her through the market, what remains of it. Fruit stalls gone. Fish sellers vanished. But the perfumers remain. You pass a table lined with jars, amber glass glinting in the sun, corked vials labeled in Latin and French and barely legible script, oils, pastes, dried petals. A man fans himself with a sprig of mint as he lectures anyone who will listen. Foul scents bring foul death. But the sweet? The sweet protects. He's not a physician, but today, he doesn't need to be. You stop near a stall where a woman boils vinegar over a coal fire. She tosses in bundles of thyme and laurel, waving the steam toward passers-by. A young couple stands in it like it's a baptism. Historians still argue whether aromatic defense worked at all, or simply offered distraction from despair. But in this square, where death can't be seen but is always felt, smell becomes salvation. You notice the detail now. Herbs nailed above doors, roses woven into hair. Even the dying wear necklaces of garlic and fennel, as though scent alone might save the soul. A breeze shifts, a torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. You pause by a fountain where children throw in coins wrapped in petals. They close their eyes, wish for their parents to get better, or for the coughing to stop. The woman in the veil kneels beside one. From her sleeve, she draws a cloth soaked in lavender. She presses it to the child's face. The child breathes in, sighs, and for a moment, everything is still. You ask her where she learned this. She replies, "From my mother, and her mother before her. We have always fought the world's stink." You smile, then frown, because even she doesn't sound like she believes it anymore. But belief is only half the point. She hands you a pomander, silver, tarnished, hinged like a locket. Inside, cinnamon, clove, dried orange peel packed in wool. "Wear it near your chest," she says. "When you breathe, let the sweetness remind you you're still here." You accept it. The chain feels cold against your skin. The smell, sharp, floral, bitter. It's not comforting, not exactly, but it feels intentional. You almost forget which century this is. You pass another closed door. It smells like thyme and something else. In a bathhouse turned herbal hall, women grind dried rose petals into powder. Packing it into cones, they burn like incense. The smoke curls upward, faintly pink. They call it air armor. A man walks by with a mask stuffed with juniper, muttering, "The richer the scent, the safer the body." You ask if it works. He shrugs. "The rich seem to think so." And indeed, the noble homes smell like spice markets now. Saffron, nutmeg, crushed pearls, and perfumes imported through ports now closed. You once knew a boy who wore violets behind his ears. He died anyway. But he smelled beautiful when they found him. You sit beneath an awning, the scent of sage and soot in your lungs. Someone lights a bundle of rosemary beside you. It hisses, then smokes. For a moment it blots out everything else, and it almost feels like healing. The red cross is fresh, painted right across the door, thick, crude, streaking slightly at the edges. Below it a scrawled phrase in black ash, "God have mercy on us." You pause. The door is shut tight, its seams stuffed with straw. A bundle of garlic hangs above the lintel. No sound comes from within. You step back, because this is quarantine. It's not the word they use, not yet. But the practice is already real. The idea? Wall off the sick. Seal them inside. Hope the pest stays, and you walk away clean. You follow the street. Every 10th house has the mark, some in red, some chalked in white, some with small sprigs of rosemary or dried lemons nailed beside them, like whispered offerings. At one, a boy stands behind shuttered windows. His hand presses the glass. He watches you pass. Doesn't wave. Doesn't need to. You pass another closed door. It smells like thyme and something else. Down the lane, you hear hammering. Quick, desperate. Someone boards up a window from the other side. A woman nearby explains, her brother was coughing. No one wants them out now. You ask how they'll get food. She doesn't answer. The system varies. In Venice, the ships wait in harbor 40 days. 40 giorni. That's the root of it. In Ragusa, the sick are sent to distant isles. In Milan, entire families are walled inside, bricks sealing fate as surely as prayer. Some towns post guards, others post warnings. In this one, you're the warning. Historians still argue whether quarantine saved more lives than it ruined. But here, it feels like a tightrope strung over fire. You reach the edge of the village. There stands a hut. Small, dry, quiet. Straw roof, cloth door. A man waves from inside. He's smiling. Self-quarantine, he calls. Voluntary. Thought it best. Just in case. You ask if he's sick. Not yet, he shrugs. But I've been around enough who are. He invites you to sit outside the hut. You do. 2 stools, 10 paces apart. He shares dried apples, tosses them to you one at a time. This is what the world is now, he says. Fruit at arm's length. You smile. He does too. Then he tells you stories. A merchant in Marseille who built walls around his own house. A widow in Siena who locked herself in with 3 dogs and a month of cheese. A ship that drifted near Sicily for 49 days before anyone dared approach. They left the captain's body on deck, he adds, as a message. You ask what message? He shrugs again. 40 days? Or forever? A breeze shifts. A torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. Later, you walk with the village warden. He carries a ledger, chalk, a dagger. He checks doors for signs of movement. Sometimes he hears nothing and writes clear. Sometimes he hears crying and still writes clear. You ask why. No one wants to open these doors, he says. No one wants to know what's inside. You remember a house from earlier? 3 children, 2 sick. Their door was open this morning. Now it's sealed. No one mentions them. You walk on. A woman lowers a basket from her window. Inside, a coin, 2 onions, a note. The baker reads it, adds a loaf, hoists it back up by rope. Contactless compassion. You pause by a gate where a family sleeps in their own garden, refusing to enter the house where someone coughed. They lie under tarps, breathing pine air, hoping it's clean. You ask if they're afraid. The mother shakes her head. We're not afraid of death. We're afraid of the sound of the lock. You almost forget which century this is. The stars rise. You return to the town square. Another cross has been painted. Still wet. And in the quiet, you wonder, when the line between sickness and suspicion fades, does the wall protect or imprison? And who gets to decide? You follow the silk trail of a nobleman's sleeve as he disappears into his study, the scent of sandalwood and honey clinging to the air. His servants shut the heavy oak door behind you, but he beckons you in, fingers adorned with rings that shimmer like captured suns. On the table before him, a goblet of glass so fine it nearly vanishes when held to light. Inside, swirling like the last glimmer of sanity, is liquid. Clear, but gleaming faintly with something impossible. Gold. Real gold, melted into tincture, steeped in belief. He raises it to his lips, his hand trembling slightly. Not with fear of death, he insists, but with hope. You see, he says, the body that contains gold cannot decay. Not quickly, at least. It's incorruptible, like saints. His smile wavers. Or kings. You watch as he drinks. It tastes, he says, like metal and sweetness. The alchemist who brewed it insisted that adding saffron would balance the body's humors, while the gold would drive out pestilence. Only the purest of elements can banish impurity, the alchemist claimed. And who was he to argue? The room is filled with symbols of wealth-turned shield, gold-leafed icons, mirrors with gilt edges, even flakes of gold pressed between the pages of a velvet-bound book labeled Remedia Sacra. Historians still argue whether this belief in gold was truly about medicine or about the illusion of control. For the wealthy, especially, death felt unnatural, something for peasants or beggars. Surely gold could buy time, if not salvation. You glance at the nobleman's shelves, row upon row of jars, each labeled with curious remedies. Powdered emerald, crushed pearls, bezoar stones from goats' stomachs. He shows you one with reverence, a scrap of parchment soaked in gold-infused oil and dried under moonlight. You're told to wear it next to the skin. Not many can afford this, he admits, not smugly, but with sorrow. But surely, if gold is incorruptible, then so too must be the man who consumes it. A dog barks in the distance. You keep walking. Down the corridor, you find the alchemist's chamber, a bitter-smelling room, filled with crucibles, cracked glass, and pages scrawled in red ink and desperation. Charts of planetary alignments, diagrams of veins and stars, and a recipe pinned to the wall. Take filings of gold, grind with sugar of lead, mix with rose water and drink before dawn. Speak no words until sunrise. The alchemist appears, eyes wild, fingers stained with mercury. He says the nobleman has survived longer than most. That gold slows decay, sharpens the spirit. That it does something. And yet, no two recipes are the same. One recommends heating gold with unicorn horn powder. Another suggests placing a coin beneath the tongue at night. A third warns, never let gold touch salt, or it will anger the balance of fire and earth. There is no consensus, only faith. You ask if anyone has recovered through these means. The alchemist chuckles, soft and dry. Recovered? No, but died splendidly. Even in death, appearance matters. You've seen corpses in linen shrouds stitched with gold thread, as though the body itself might glitter enough to distract the plague. And in city after city, apothecaries whisper that gold never tarnishes, even when buried, as if that permanence might bleed upward into the veins of the living. The breeze shifts. A torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. Later, the nobleman lies in bed, breath thin. Servants dab his brow with cloths dipped in myrrh and vinegar. A priest murmurs prayers at the door, but the alchemist hovers closer. He asks if you've ever seen true transformation. That's what alchemy seeks. Not riches, but refinement. The body, he claims, is just another metal. Base, heavy, changeable. Maybe the plague is the fire, he whispers, and gold the proof that we might emerge, purified. You notice a golden glint in the nobleman's hairline. A sheen of sweat, or something else? In the quiet that follows, you pick up the goblet again. Still warm, still shimmering faintly. You place it down without drinking. Outside, a beggar coughs. The sound is wet, immediate. No gold protects him. No silver lines his throat. Yet somehow, he's still breathing. You wonder, for a moment, if purity has less to do with what enters the body and more to do with what's left when all else is burned away. The morning stinks of liver and smoke. You step into the market square where blood pools in the cracks of the cobblestones, warming slightly beneath the butcher's boots. His apron is streaked with brown and rust red, a map of yesterday's cuts and today's best guesses. He spots you and grins, a tooth missing, another gold. You're not from here, he says, not asking. But death is, so it don't matter. You nod, because it's true. He gestures you closer with the same hand that just finished splitting a sheep's flank. Come for mutton or medicine? He laughs before you answer. Don't bother with those plague doctors and their beaks. What you need is honest meat. Fat, onion, sweat. You blink, unsure if he's joking. He is not. From beneath his stall, he pulls out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Unfolded, it reveals a small jar of goose fat, thick and pale, next to 3 dirt-cloaked onions, and something that might have once been sage. Rub this on your chest every night, he says, nodding with authority. Then stuff the onions in your socks, draws the poison right down. You ask how he knows. My cousin Alfie, coughing blood one day, gutting rabbits the next, swears by it. The butcher believes deeply in his cures. They're the ones passed down not in books, but in bone, whispered over boiling pots and smoking grates. He's certain plague is a matter of balance. If your blood boils, cool it. If your belly's cold, warm it. Fat's the thing, soaks it up. Historians still argue whether such folk remedies were survival strategies or acts of desperate hope. But even modern scholars admit, in a world without antibiotics, a jar of goose fat might have been the closest thing to control. A rat scurries across the floor. You don't flinch. He leans in closer, lowering his voice. Know what else works? Bad smells, real bad ones. Keeps the plague spirits confused. Think they hate competition. He gestures to a half-rotten fish behind the stall, waving away a cloud of flies. Just hang it over your bed. You'll dream like a saint. You ask what saints dream about. He shrugs. Clean deaths, I suppose. Behind him, a young boy sweeps sawdust over bloodstains. Another sharp cough echoes from the alley, and both the butcher and boy freeze. But only for a breath. Then it's back to business. You wander further through the market, where other vendors peddle their own cures. A garlic necklace strung like pearls, dried eels soaked in wine, a duck's heart wrapped in linen and tied to the ankle. Everyone knows someone who survived. Everyone believes they know why. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. You find a woman selling live geese. She tells you the fat works best if the bird is killed on a Friday, when the moon is waning and sorrow is high. She says this with the solemnity of a bishop, handing you a feather for luck. Later, back at your lodging, you smear the goose fat across your chest. It's sticky and sour-smelling, clinging to your skin like superstition. The onions go in your socks, as instructed. And as you lie still, the sensation is somewhere between uncomfortable and oddly comforting, like armor made of pantry scraps. You almost forget which century this is. In the night, dreams come. You're walking through a butcher's shop that stretches on forever. The counters glisten. The air smells of cloves and marrow. Behind every cleavered joint is a memory. Someone who once swore by the cure. Alfie, the garlic woman, the boy with the sage. They smile at you from the other side of the glass. When you wake, there's a faint ache in your ankles. But you're breathing. You're warm. And in this city, that counts for something. The butcher was right in a way. You don't need to understand a cure for it to help. Sometimes it's the act of trying, the rhythm of ritual, the story told around it, that keeps the breath in your lungs just a little longer. Outside your window, a bell rings, softer this time. You pull the onion from your sock and hold it up. It's warm, slightly damp. You swear, just for a moment, that it looks proud. The smell hits you before the sound. Charred cloth, singed flesh, something sharp and coppery lingering just beneath the smoke. Then comes the hiss, a wet, seething exhale, and the stifled scream that follows. You turn the corner and find a man hunched over another, pressing a glowing iron rod against a pale, swollen lump on the victim's armpit. The iron sizzles where it meets skin. Steam curls upward like incense gone terribly wrong. You flinch, but no one else around you does. This is how we drive it out, the iron holder mutters, not to you, but to himself. The fire follows the rot. Better out than in. The bubo, so swollen and purple it looks like it might speak, leaks something thick as the skin splits. The man collapses sideways, unconscious, maybe grateful. Nearby, a woman retches into her sleeve. The heat draws the poison, someone explains, burns it clean away. The logic is simple. Where there's swelling, there's sickness. And where there's sickness, there must be cleansing. And what's cleaner, more absolute, than fire? You glance at the iron as it's returned to the hearth. A glowing stick now black at the end, coated in residue. The doctor, Or is he just a brave neighbor? Doesn't wear a mask, just a rag soaked in vinegar tied around his mouth. Historians still argue whether this was healing or torture, ritual or real remedy, but one thing is clear. When medicine offers nothing, flame becomes faith. You pass another closed door. It smells like time and something else. Later, you sit beside an old woman with blistered fingers. She shows you her own cure: boiled nettles, mashed with honey, applied directly to the boils. If it stings, she says, it's working. She points to a younger man, asleep nearby, his neck wrapped in layers of bandage stained with yellow and brown. He's still alive, she says with tired pride. You wonder if survival is now the only measure of truth. Others swear by cauterizing not just buboes, but the soles of the feet, the palms, even behind the ears. Draw it toward the fire, they say, then send it to hell. There are even those who insert red-hot needles into blisters to burst them clean. You shudder as a child is brought forth, his groin dark with swelling. His mother weeps silently as he is laid on the stone table. No one offers comfort, only heat. A candle flickers. Someone just whispered your name. There are other fire-based treatments too. Powders thrown into flame and inhaled. Sulfur burned in sealed rooms to smoke the sickness out. In one alley, a man fans burning sage into his mouth and insists the heat chases the plague from his breath. Some boil vinegar with iron nails and inhale the steam. Others burn toad skins and breathe deep. It's a time where smoke equals safety, no matter what burns to make it. You find yourself warming your hands near one such fire, unconsciously leaning closer, as though its crackle could reassure you. It's hard to know what comforts anymore. Maybe just the act of doing something, anything, against the invisible tide. The breeze shifts. A torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. You recall hearing about a healer who branded symbols into the backs of patients. Circles for protection. Crosses for penance. Spirals to confuse the demon within. Another simply painted the sores with tar and set them alight. You see it in people's eyes, the desire not just to survive, but to fight, to take back a fragment of control, even if it means burning yourself to the bone. A boy passes you holding a piece of red glass, pretending it's a glowing coal. His game seems innocent until he presses it to his sister's arm, giggling. She yelps, and a moment later, their mother pulls them both away, one scolding, the other smirking. It's how they learn, you suppose. Not from books, but from burns. Later that night, in your own quiet corner of the city, you sit before a candle and press its flame close to a piece of cloth soaked in vinegar. You're not sick, yet, but you feel the need to do something. The fire dances, the cloth singes, the scent is sharp and bitter and strangely comforting. You breathe it in deeply, eyes closed. Outside, someone screams, then silence, then coughing. You sit still and hope the heat holds it off just one more day. You hear shouting before you see her. Down the muddy street, past shuttered stalls and windows smeared with ash, a crowd gathers. Angry voices rise in waves. Children peer from doorways, eyes wide. A man tosses something, a root, maybe a stone, and it bounces off her shawl. She stumbles but doesn't cry out. Her hands are bound in front of her, red marks around the wrists. Her hair, half gray and tangled, falls in a mat over one shoulder. She limps, favoring her left foot. Someone in the crowd calls her a hag. Another calls her worse. She doesn't respond to either. You hear someone whisper, "She killed the cow and the baby," with just a look. The crowd parts slightly as she's dragged toward the church steps. There, a small table has been set. Paperwork, a candle, a cross, and a man in a robe who looks both exhausted and eager. The accusation is short, that she laid a curse on her neighbor's cow, which died the next day, and now the household is sick. That she was seen collecting herbs at night. That her well never ran dry when others did. That her bread always rose. And, most damning of all, that she smiled when someone else's child coughed. Historians still argue whether these trials were about plague, power, or panic. But in this moment, you see only fear desperately seeking a face. A bell rings again, softer this time. The woman is told to recite the Lord's Prayer. She begins, voice hoarse. When she falters on a word, deliver, someone gasps. She stumbles. A witch can't say holy words. You watch the man behind the table nod gravely. Ink scratches paper. The air is sharp with tallow smoke and sweat. Someone nearby mutters that witches boil toads, whisper into bread dough, write names backwards with lamb's blood. Another insists they speak with rats. And rats, after all, have been everywhere lately. You look down and see one, watching. The woman is led away, not screaming, but muttering. Something soft, something you can't quite hear. A dog barks in the distance. You keep walking. Later, in a low tavern with moldy bread and bitter ale, you hear more stories. A man claims his cousin was cursed when a woman blinked at him during morning prayers. Another swears a girl turned water into worms. A third just shrugs. We've tried everything. If magic caused this, maybe magic can fix it. You think back to the woman's eyes. They weren't evil. They were tired. You pass a wall where someone has painted a red mark, a crude symbol meant to ward off curses. Next to it, a dried chicken foot dangles from a nail, tied with twine and sage. Even those who scorn witches borrow their methods, just in case. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. You follow a winding path to the edge of the village, where an old healer's hut stands half-collapsed. Inside, bundles of dried herbs, jars of moss, a wooden bowl carved with unfamiliar symbols. Nothing sinister, nothing sacred. Just things from the earth. You touch a small sachet filled with rosemary, thyme, and something sweet. Lavender, perhaps. You remember the scent from another place. Another time. The healer is long gone, but the tools remain. Knowledge unclaimed. Blame has chased wisdom out of town. Whispers float through your thoughts. She smiled at the wrong moment. She owned a black cat. She wore green on a Thursday. You almost forget which century this is. By nightfall, you return to the market square. The table is still there, now covered in wax drippings and a crust of old bread. The crowd is gone. The fear, not so much. You smell it in the damp earth, hear it in how shutters click closed a little faster than before. You light a small candle and place it on the stone. Not for her, not for guilt, but for the quiet things no one sees. A charm, perhaps. Or maybe just memory. The hall smells of ink and melted wax. You sit on a wooden bench, its edge polished smooth by centuries of anxious elbows. Before you, a collection of scholars in dark robes gather beneath high, stained glass windows. The light filtering through makes their faces look like painted saints, if saints ever looked this tired. Scrolls are unfurled, throats cleared, quills poised. Someone coughs. No one comments. The university has summoned its best minds, you're told. A gathering of doctors and philosophers, priests and mathematicians. Today, they will decide why so many are dying. Not how to save them. No one pretends that's possible. But why? A thick-jawed man steps forward and begins to read. The conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in the 40th degree of Aquarius. He speaks slowly, each word weighted like stone. You glance sideways at the man beside you, who nods solemnly, as though planetary alignments are as plain as rainfall. The theory is this. The heavens moved wrongly. 3 great planets aligned in a way they should not have, stirring corruption in the air itself. Not gods punishing man, but the sky, malfunctioning. Historians still argue whether this famous report was based in science or superstition. But in this moment, you watch a room full of brilliant men nod at the stars with reverence and dread. Your breath fogs the air. The past leans in. The report continues. This astral event, compounded by excessive dampness and heat, created a miasma, unbalanced, moist, and poisonous. Moist. The word hangs there, heavy and almost absurd. Someone coughs again. Charts are unrolled, showing spheres and orbits, symbols for fire and water, wind and bile. Another doctor speaks. Mars governs blood. Saturn governs decay. Jupiter, the balance between. He taps the parchment with conviction. All three collided. There is no mention of rats, no mention of fleas, no mention of sanitation or proximity or bodies piled in cellars. Only stars and seasons, winds and whims. And to be fair, you don't know that they're wrong. Outside, the sky is iron gray. You glance up and wonder what Jupiter is doing now. If it still leans heavy in Aquarius, if it even remembers. A candle flickers. Someone just whispered your name. Later, a student offers to show you the observatory. You climb a spiral staircase that seems too narrow for wisdom to pass through. At the top, beneath a low, domed roof, sits a long brass tube aimed skyward. Sometimes we track comets, he says. Sometimes signs. He shows you a chart. A fever graph tied not to days or bodies, but to the movements of Venus. Love rises with death, he says. Some think they're linked. You peer through the telescope. The sky looks the same as it always does. Indifferent. In the scriptorium below, scribes are already copying the report. It will be sent to other cities. It will be believed. Not because it's true, but because it's official. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. One scholar suggests bloodletting at dawn. Another insists the air must be pierced with trumpets to dispel foul vapors. A third mumbles about fire again. Always fire. You begin to wonder if explanation even matters. The student walks you out into the courtyard. He looks barely older than a boy, but speaks with the calm of someone used to memorizing the world. We must believe in something, he says. If not God, then geometry. You smile, not because it's funny, but because it's something to hold. As you leave, the great bell of the university tolls behind you. Another day's work completed, another report written, another truth sent into the world, wrapped in parchment, stamped with wax, born on the backs of stars. The palace smells different. Gone are the usual perfumes: rosemary, rosewater, clove. Today, the air is sharp with vinegar, garlic, and something older. The dusty scent of incense burned too often. You step through the great arched doorway into a world of silk and suspicion. You're not meant to be here. But few question anyone moving slowly, silently, and with purpose. A servant leads you past tapestries depicting saints and lions, kings and angels, all watching silently as death creeps through the corridors. At the heart of the palace, behind a thick velvet curtain, the king's physician stands over a silver tray. On it, a clove of garlic, a pinch of crushed ruby, and a folded scrap of parchment inked with prayers. He turns to the king, who does not appear sick, only pale from worry, and begins the day's ritual. First, the garlic. Raw, pungent, pressed into a linen pouch and tucked into the king's sleeve. Next, the ruby powder. Not for ingestion, but for inhalation, he explains. The gem, ground fine and mixed with vinegar, is said to strengthen the heart and drive out corruption. The stone of kings, he mutters, cannot befriend decay. Finally, the prayer. He whispers it 3 times, once in Latin, once in French, and once, softly, in a tongue you don't recognize. The king does not interrupt. Historians still argue whether royal regimens were more about comfort than cure. But standing here, you realize, when the plague touches the crown responds with theater. The breeze shifts. A torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. The physician records everything in a ledger bound in goatskin. Pulse strong today, he writes. Odor of breath, neutral. Sleep, dreamless. These are not just notes. They are talismans. The act of observing feels like a defense in itself. You're shown the royal apothecary's cabinet next. Drawers of cinnamon bark and nutmeg, labeled warm, dry, balancing. Small jars of ambergris, powdered pearls, even powdered coral, meant to cool the bile and temper the spleen. A larger bottle contains rose syrup infused with gold flakes, to be sipped at dusk while monks chant in the next room. You glance out the window and see smoke rising from the poorer quarters. Here, the king drinks from crystal goblets while down below, families drink boiled dandelion and hope. You almost forget which century this is. In the throne room, cushions have been removed, tapestries taken down, all things that might trap air and harbor plague. Only marble and metal remain, cold, unwelcoming, purified by absence. The physician insists that the king must avoid strong emotions, grief, rage, lust, lest they unbalance his humors. A jester now performs only soft tricks. No laughter, just mild amusement. Safe amusement. You begin to see the king as less a man and more a monument under siege. Later, the queen appears with a string of garlic cloves braided into her hair. She wears rubies around her neck and murmurs prayers with each step. A courtier bows deeply and compliments her glow. You think it's fear, not radiance. In a side chapel, a priest burns incense laced with frankincense and sulfur. Sweetness to draw angels, he says. Bitterness to drive away demons. He gestures for you to join the chant. You don't know the words, but you hum along anyway. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. That night, you are invited to a quiet meal in the servants' hall. There is bread, wine, and a garlic soup so strong your eyes water. A young page sits beside you and says, "They think if the king lives, we all will. Like he's a gate." You ask, "What if the gate swings open?" The page shrugs. "Then we pray harder." Back in your chamber, you find a clove of garlic left on your pillow. A small token of protection, wrapped in linen, tied with blue thread. You tuck it under your chin and lie still. Somewhere far off, a bell tolls. And this time, no one moves. You stand barefoot on a cold stone floor, wrapped in a threadbare towel. Steam coils upward from the bath before you, rising in thick, lazy spirals that brush the tiled ceiling like incense smoke. The water is warm, fragrant with rosemary and mint. It beckons. And yet, no one else is bathing. You were told this bathhouse used to be full, a place of laughter, gossip, healing. Now it's nearly silent. Echoes bounce from wall to wall like ghosts trying to remember their names. You hesitate. Not because of modesty, no one watches, but because of fear. Some say baths heal. Others say they invite death. The logic? Simple. Bathing opens the pores. And if the air is poisoned, as so many claim, then open pores are open doors. Naked skin, damp and vulnerable, may as well be an invitation. But your body aches. Your back is tight. Your knees feel old. And the memory of clean water is almost as tempting as the promise of sleep. Historians still argue whether medieval people avoided baths entirely or just feared badly timed ones. In plague years, timing was everything. You dip a toe in. The warmth is immediate and shockingly kind. You remember someone saying, "Only the rich bathe now. They can afford scented oils. The poor just sweat and hope." A woman appears quietly beside you. Her hair is pinned high, and she carries a bucket of hot water laced with cloves and sage. She nods to the bath, says nothing, and pours slowly, steam billowing up like a curtain. Then she vanishes behind another door. You almost forget which century this is. You ease yourself into the tub. The water closes around your chest like a sigh. Muscles loosen. Breathing slows. You lie back, and the ceiling swims. It's not indulgent. It's medicinal, you tell yourself. A remedy. Even monks once bathed. Carefully. Briefly. Some orders permitted washing only 4 times a year, once per season. But those who cared for the sick sometimes did more. In your half-dreaming state, you imagine monks in candlelit cells scrubbing one another's backs, murmuring prayers with every rinse. A bell rings again, softer this time. You reach for the cloth beside you and dip it into the water, dragging it across your shoulder like memory. The steam curls into your nose, and suddenly you are a child again, bathed in the kitchen basin, while your mother hummed a tune about saints and storms. You close your eyes. Then a whisper enters your thoughts. Clean skin dies quicker. You sit up, heart quickened. Did you hear it? Or was it just the echo of too many warnings? You dry quickly, wrapping the towel back around your limbs. A shiver chases the water from your skin. The bath, once soothing, now seems too open, too exposing. You open the door and walk into the cooler air beyond. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. A man in the corridor hands you a bundle of dried herbs tied with string. For the room, he says, to keep the wet air from inviting anything worse. You thank him and move on. That night, you do not sleep well. Not from sickness, but uncertainty. Your pores feel open. Your skin tender. You lie awake wondering if you let something in, or washed something off. Either way, you're different now. Maybe that's all healing ever is. You crouch beside the physician as he lifts the cat's paw. It's stiff, the fur matted with something dark and drying. He presses gently at the base of the jaw, tilting the animal's head to examine its eyes, which stare blankly toward nothing now. Around you, the alley is still, except for the occasional flap of laundry in the breeze and a child's distant cough. The physician doesn't seem to notice. 3 dead this morning, he mutters, and 2 more curled under the steps. This one's lungs rattle when shaken. He gestures for his assistant, a boy no older than 13, to take notes on a tablet of slate. You glance around and realize he's cataloged them. Each cat, each piglet, even a few rats laid carefully on a cloth-covered table. The street has become a morgue for creatures no one will bury. The doctor holds up the cat's tongue. Swollen, he says. Just like the tanner's boy. You shiver. Historians still argue whether these early investigations into animal death were science or superstition. But in the plague years, humans watched the animals as if they were mirrors. Soft, furry warnings of what came next. A dog barks in the distance. You keep walking. You pass another table, this one filled with small birds. Finches, mostly, gathered from the windowsills of the sick. A woman offers you a feather, says it will bring luck. You don't take it. At the edge of the market square, you find a man feeding a pig raw garlic. Keeps the devil out, he says, grinning. The pig, for its part, looks utterly indifferent. But you notice a few red spots near its ear. The man doesn't. In a nearby shop, a scroll is posted with a crude drawing of a dog marked with sores. Beneath it, "If your beast sickens, leave the city." A boy reads it aloud to his sister and giggles. She does not laugh. You enter the physician's tent again. Inside, a pig is being cut open. The smell is unbearable. Sweet, rancid, thick. The doctor calls it a comparative autopsy and begins naming parts in Latin. The spleen is too dark, the liver wrongly wet. He leans in, prodding the tissue like he might ask it a question. A candle flickers. Someone just whispered your name. He turns to you. They die first, you know, the animals. They tell us what's next. You ask if that helps. He pauses. Sometimes. But mostly it just makes us afraid earlier. The assistant, still scribbling, looks up. The butcher's goat hasn't eaten in 2 days. The physician nods solemnly and writes, Goat? Appetite loss. Prognosis. Unfavorable. You almost forget which century this is. Later, outside the city walls, a pile of dead dogs smolders slowly. Smoke curls upward, stinging your eyes. A few townspeople have gathered, not out of respect, but to watch. One old man holds a cat in his arms, stroking it like an apology. They blamed the cats at first, he tells you. Then they missed the cats. Rats everywhere now. And he's right. You spot them, scuttling through gutters, clawing at shutters, thriving. One climbs the corpse pile and disappears into the smoke. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. That night, you dream of animals with human voices. The cat tells you to run. The pig says it's too late. The bird pecks your shoulder and whispers, "You're next." You wake before dawn, and when you open the door to the street, a single mouse sits there, cleaning its whiskers, watching you, waiting. The surgeon arrives at dusk, not with trumpets or retinue, but with a creaking cart, its wheels bandaged in old leather to quiet the sound. He sets up beside the fountain, long dry now, and arranges his wares beneath a faded canvas awning. You watch from across the square as people trickle in, cautious, curious, and clinging to coins. He wears a red-stained apron and carries no insignia, no crest of any learned college. But he has something more valuable than credentials. He has a drawer, or rather, a small chest with dozens of them, each one labeled with curling script, each one locked, until asked. You wander closer, drawn by the scent of anise, clove, and something darker. He sees you and smiles. Looking for protection? Or resurrection? You ask what he means. He opens a drawer. Inside, thin slices of dried toad, shriveled and curling like pressed leaves. Steep in wine, he says. Then bathe your feet. Keeps the death out of your blood. He opens another. Powdered horn, possibly unicorn, more likely goat. Sprinkle on the tongue of the sick. If they gag, they still have a chance. And another. This one gives you pause. A dark, grainy substance in a small glass vial. Mumia, he says quietly. Genuine. Ground from noble remains. Egypt, most likely. Very old. Very pure. You almost forget which century this is. You hesitate. He shrugs. It's just medicine. Or memory. Depending how you use it. Historians still argue whether mummy medicine was effective, placebo, or pure exploitation. But in these times, the dead had value, and not just as a warning. You scan the other drawers, some labeled in Latin, some in no language at all. Lapis viridis, mandragora, ash of hanged men, stomach stone of a doe. He taps the last one. That one? Stops convulsions. Sometimes. A breeze stirs the awning. The smell sharpens. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. The surgeon draws out a scroll. It lists services. Bloodletting, half pint or full. Bubo lancing, includes vinegar poultice. Leech application, 1 per coin. Amulet engraving. Custom phrases cost extra. You ask how long he's been traveling. Long enough to know that plague follows the fearful, and so do I. You ask if he's ever cured anyone. Once, I think, he says, then smiles. But maybe she just liked the way I smelled. He motions you closer, lowers his voice. I have something stronger. Not for everyone. He opens a hidden drawer at the bottom, one with no label. Inside is a bundle wrapped in oiled silk. He unfolds it to reveal a small black tablet pressed with the shape of a hand. Swallow it whole, he says. Don't chew. Don't pray after. Just wait. You ask what it does. Depends who you are. You don't take it. Instead, you ask for something simpler. He sells you a small pouch of rose ash and crushed bone. Bury it under your pillow. It'll keep the sickness dreaming in another room. That night, you do just that. And your dreams are strange. You walk through a market filled with surgeons, each with their own drawers, their own promises. One offers dust made from the sigh of a saint. Another holds up a flask of melted church bell. All of them look like him, and none of them blink. You wake before sunrise. The pouch is still beneath your pillow. So is the fear. You hear it first as a murmur, quiet, heavy, and wrong. It snakes through the alleys like fog, seeping from doorway to doorway, whispered behind cupped hands. The wells, someone says. It's the wells. They've been poisoned. You ask who would do such a thing. The woman who answers doesn't meet your eyes. The Jews, she says, as if it explains everything. And in this moment, you feel something shift. Not the air, but the people. The plague kills the body, but this kills something quieter, the part that remembers how to trust. You follow the crowd toward the well in the square. It's ringed with torches, even in daylight. A bucket has been hauled up and overturned, its water left to darken the dust. Men argue. A priest prays. A boy cries as his father says, "We can't drink until it's been blessed again." No one asks for proof, just a name. Historians still argue whether these accusations were seeded by fear, power, or opportunity. But there is no debate about the result. Communities vanished overnight, burned, drowned, expelled. You walk past a house with its door broken in. A mezuzah still clings to the frame. Inside, overturned chairs, a bowl of half-prepared dough, and silence. You pass another closed door. It smells like time and something else. Later, at the edge of town, you see a line of carts heading away. Covered wagons, children peeking through canvas. No one speaks to them, no one offers food. A man beside you mutters, "Safer if they're gone." You ask safer for whom? He doesn't answer. You almost forget which century this is. In a nearby tavern, a trader tells you about cities farther east where whole communities were thrown into rivers, others locked in synagogues and burned alive. Some say the plague skipped those places after, he adds, sipping his wine. So maybe it worked. You ask if he believes that. He laughs into his cup. I believe in being careful. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. You return to the square at dusk. Someone scrawled a red X on the well's stones. Below it, in charcoal, "Cleanse by flame." A dog licks the mark and walks on. That night, you sit near the hearth, unlit. Just warmth from the coals, no fire. You remember a man who once sold candles marked with Hebrew prayers, bright blue wax that smelled faintly of myrrh. He'd smile as he lit them for customers of every faith. You haven't seen him in days. A bell rings again, softer this time. You whisper his name just once, to the coals. They crack, but do not answer. You lie back and stare at the ceiling. The plague takes breath, but fear takes memory. It rewrites who was kind, who gave bread, who warned you when the soldiers came. And when the sickness finally leaves, the silences it created will linger far longer than the wounds. You find him just beyond the city gate, where the wall curves inward and ivy climbs unchecked. A wooden ladder leans against crumbling stone, and at its top, a man with paint-smeared sleeves and wind-burned cheeks dabs carefully at a bony wrist. You squint upward. It's a skeleton. Painted in bold lines and dark reds, its grin too wide, its eye sockets too empty. But it's not alone. Around it dance others. A bishop, still clutching his crozier. A king, crown askew. A baker, apron fluttering. A child. A knight. A pregnant woman. All equal now. All holding hands. The artist hums as he works. You ask him what it is. "The danse macabre," he says without turning. "The dance of death. It's coming to every wall." He steps down the ladder and wipes his brush on a rag already ruined with colors. His smile is tired, but kind. "If they must die," he says, "they should know they're not dying alone." You ask why he paints it here, outside the gate. So the dead have somewhere to gather before they knock. Historians still argue whether the danse macabre was meant to warn, to mourn, or to mock. But this feels like a lullaby in pigment. You almost forget which century this is. He shows you his sketches. More skeletons, some laughing, some solemn. Always with the living. A noblewoman offering her hand to a corpse in a tattered veil. A soldier bowing to a skull crowned in laurels. "They'll cover the whole wall," he says. "No space left unclaimed." A breeze stirs the ivy. The bones seem to sway. You ask how long he's been painting. "Since my brother danced," he replies. He doesn't elaborate. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. Later, you sit beside the wall as the sun drops low. Others have gathered, quietly, a mother and her 2 children, an old man with a walking stick, a young couple holding hands, fingers trembling. They all stare at the wall. The children point to the skeleton in priestly robes, laughing. The mother shushes them gently, but the artist leans down and says, "That one tells the best jokes." You smile. It's a strange thing, this wall. Not beautiful exactly, but necessary. The bell of the city tolls. No one flinches. The artist adds a final detail to the baker's apron, 3 tiny poppy seeds. "For dreams," he says, though no one asked. You ask him what happens when the wall is full. He shrugs. "Then I find the next one." You watch as he folds up his ladder, places his brushes in a leather case worn soft with use, and walks into the dark. His feet make no sound. But in your mind, you hear music. Faint, sweet, unmistakable. Bones tapping bones in rhythm. And somewhere in the distance, laughter that doesn't belong to the living or the dead. The city is too quiet. You expected bells tolling, the murmur of prayer, the rhythmic sobs of the morning. But instead, there's only wind threading through shuttered windows and doorways left ajar. You step through the gate, no one stops you, and pause beneath the arch, staring down an empty boulevard lined with crumbling plaster and tangled weeds. A sign swings on rusted hinges. A cat darts across the road. You hear your own breath like it belongs to someone else, and no physicians. You ask a washerwoman, bent over a basin near the well. She doesn't look up. "They left," she says, scrubbing harder. "Weeks ago. Said their work was done." You ask if they cured anyone. She laughs, short and hard. "They cured themselves, by running." You walk on. The door to the town infirmary hangs open. Inside, cots lie scattered, some still stained, some still occupied. No attendants, no candles, just the thick, low scent of linen left too long in damp rooms. You call out. No answer. Historians still argue whether physician flight was cowardice, calculation, or simply self-preservation. But for those left behind, it felt like betrayal written in footsteps. A candle flickers. Someone just whispered your name. You step into what was once a physician's study. Papers lie strewn across the desk. An anatomy chart curls off the wall. A letter remains sealed, untouched. You open it carefully. "To whom it may concern, I have taken leave of the city. My tools are yours. My faith, however, I keep." You glance around. The tools, gone. The faith, harder to measure. You pass another house where a sign hangs crooked in the window. 3 red circles painted in haste. It's the mark of a plague doctor's home. Inside, dust, dried herbs, a single cracked mask lying on a stool. The beak is split, the eye lens missing. You almost forget which century this is. The townspeople avoid your gaze. You ask who treats the sick now. A boy points. Her. You turn and see a girl, no older than 16, lifting a bucket of water beside an old man coughing blood. She says nothing, but her sleeves are rolled, her hands steady. A poultice in one, a cloth in the other. You ask her name. She says, "It doesn't matter. I'm not a doctor." And then, softly, "That's why I stayed." The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. In the church, the pews are half full. The priest speaks not of healing, but of endurance. "If the doctors flee," he says, "perhaps we must become something else." He anoints with lavender oil and wraps rosaries around wrists, not to cure, but to comfort. Outside, a chalkboard has been set up in the square. Written on it in neat looping script, "If you need help, knock 3 times. If you offer help, wait until dusk. If you're scared, you are not alone." Later that evening, you sit by the fountain with others who stayed. Bakers, barbers, midwives, gravediggers. No titles now, just tasks. You watch as a boy tapes a note to the infirmary door. The doctor is gone, but we are here. A bell rings again, softer this time. And though the wind is rising, no one moves. Because this city has already been left. And still, it remains. The sachet smells like crushed summer, mint, wormwood, chamomile, and a trace of lavender, all tied together in a faded scrap of linen, stitched with tiny, crooked letters you can't quite decipher. You were given it by a quiet woman with ink-stained fingers who said it had once belonged to her mother. Sleep with it near your head, she told you. It won't stop the plague, but it might stop the fear. Tonight, you believe her. You tuck it beneath your pillow, close your eyes, and try to imagine fields that haven't burned, towns that haven't emptied, rooms that don't echo. And slowly, you begin to dream. You walk through meadows that hum with bees. A stream gurgles nearby, and the sun, soft, not scorching, falls through trees with leaves like tiny green prayers. No bells ring, no coughs interrupt, just the chirr of insects and the cool breath of peace. You turn your face to the wind. It smells of mint and damp earth. Historians still argue whether sleep sachets had any physical effect. But folklore tells another story, that herbs remember things the body forgets. That scent is the last language between us and comfort. The breeze shifts. A torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. In the dream, you find a house with no door. You walk through the wall like smoke. Inside, a bed freshly made. A loaf cooling on the sill. A cat curled on a chair, purring. You sit, and the house does not vanish. It stays. Later, the scene shifts. You walk a narrow path lined with hanging sachets. Dozens of them, hundreds, swaying like tiny lanterns. Each one whispers something. A name, a place, a song. You stop beneath one marked with a blue thread. It hums your name. You wake just before dawn, the sky still velvet gray. The sachet lies beside your pillow, warm to the touch. The room is quiet. You almost forget which century this is. Outside, a neighbor lights a sprig of rosemary and waves it near the doorframe. Not for scent, for safety. You do the same with yours. Down the lane, an old man sits under a canopy of drying herbs. He sells small bundles wrapped in twine, each one labeled by effect. For grief, for courage, for silence. You buy one labeled, for remembering the sound of the river. You don't ask what's inside. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. That night, others bring their charms to the square. A woman ties rue into her child's hair. A young man pins a sprig of yarrow to his coat. An apothecary shares honeyed lozenges shaped like leaves. The air smells like hope, pretending not to be fragile. You return to your room, place the sachet beside your head, and lie down. And though no cure comes, something else does. Rest. The broom in your hands is rough, made of twigs bound tight with hemp. It scratches the stone with each stroke, sending dust into the already soured air. Beside you, another figure sprinkles something green into the gutter, a mix of sage, marjoram, and a few sad sprigs of rosemary. The city has ordered this, not the physicians, the mayor. "Clean streets make clean lungs," he proclaimed from the council hall, his voice echoing off pillars and panic alike. "We fight the plague not with prayers alone, but with perfumed reason." So now you sweep, and now they scatter herbs, not because anyone is cured, but because people still need something to do. A cart rolls past, laden with sacks of lavender and bundles of mint. A boy on the back tosses fistfuls into the street like flower petals at a wedding no one asked to attend. You ask the woman beside you if it works. She shrugs. "It smells better, doesn't it?" You almost forget which century this is. The church bells ring at odd hours now, part warning, part scheduling. When they chime twice, it means change the linens. When they chime 3 times, sweep the drains. If they ring 4, it means the fires begin. You look down the street and see a man lighting small braziers filled with juniper. The smoke coils upward, thick and sweet. In some parts of the city, it's illegal not to burn herbs. A candle flickers. Someone just whispered your name. You're handed a satchel marked for midday distribution. Inside, handfuls of sweet flag, lemon balm, crushed pine needles. You toss a pinch near each doorway. One old man nods solemnly as you pass. It's not the smell, he says. It's the gesture. By noon, your hands are stained green. Your throat tastes of time and grit. But the streets are lighter now, visibly no cleaner, but spiritually less abandoned. Historians still argue whether these civic scent rituals had any medical merit. But no one denies the impact of unity, even in small motions. When all hands move together, the plague seems, if only briefly, to flinch. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. At the city square, officials read out new edicts. Boil linens weekly. Bury waste in lime pits. All meat sold must be blessed or dried. Sweep daily. Burn nightly. Smile when possible. You help hang a sprig of vervain above the baker's door. A small charm, a hopeful lie. And yet, the bread smells sweeter after. Later, in the mayor's hall, perfumers arrive with carts of petals and bark, oils and waxes. They craft sachets for civic workers, candles for sick wards, even perfumes for mass graves, though no one dares name them that aloud. You're handed a tiny vial. Open it only if you stop believing, someone tells you. It smells like before. That night, you return to your cot. The streets behind you are faintly glowing with the embers of burned herbs. The gutters shimmer with wilted leaves. It looks like the city tried to grow something, even if it never could. You hold the broom close, like a sword made of labor, and sleep without dreams. Her cottage leans slightly to the left, as if the wind has whispered too many secrets through its shutters. You find her there, barefoot on the stoop, peeling a gnarled apple with a knife that's more scar than blade. She looks up. You're not sick, she says, not as a question. Yet. You nod. She gestures you inside. The air is thick with the scent of vinegar, warm stone, and something sweet you can't quite name. On the table, a jar of preserved lemons, a bowl of dried rose hips, and a book, bound in cracked leather and tied with fraying ribbon. My husband called it nonsense, she says, untangling the knot. Then he got the fever. Now it's scripture. She opens the book. Each page is filled with looping, careful handwriting. No dates, no headings, just instructions like spells. Grate nutmeg into hot wine. Pour clockwise. Drink beneath a waning moon. Boil water with basil and thyme. Place beneath the bed. Do not speak until morning. You sit. She hands you a cup of something dark and steaming. Sip slow. It's mostly vinegar, but the nutmeg softens the bite. You almost forget which century this is. As you drink, she hums. Not a tune you know, but one your bones seem to remember. A lullaby too old for words. She stirs a pot on the stove, adding cloves, dried figs, and the rind of something citrus. You ask her where she learned all this. My mother, she says. And hers before that. We keep what helps. We throw out what doesn't. Except the singing. Always keep the singing. A breeze shifts the curtains. Light falls across the recipe book. One entry catches your eye. If their breath falters, place honey beneath the tongue. Whisper their name 3 times. Then your own. You look at her. She's still humming. Historians still argue whether these folk remedies were survival, superstition, or silent resistance. But in kitchens like this, healing never came from doctors. It came from women with steady hands and quiet songs. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. She offers you a bundle wrapped in muslin, dried petals, a twist of orange peel, and a pinch of crushed walnut. For your pillow, she says, and for remembering something softer. You thank her. She waves it off. Just don't forget to sing. That night, in your borrowed room, you open the bundle and tuck it beside your head. The scent is faint, floral, bitter, calming. And then, without quite meaning to, you hum. It's not her tune. It's something yours. A bell rings again, softer this time. You lie still. And somewhere in the distance, maybe even just inside you, a woman stirs a pot and sings into the steam. You arrive just before twilight, when the shadows stretch long and the air cools enough to taste like iron. The chapel is small, less a building than a shelter of stone and wood, hunched against the hillside like it's trying to hide. A candle flickers in the window. A bell, hand-sized, rusted, hangs from a crooked beam. You push the door open gently. Inside, it smells of beeswax and old stone. The pews are empty except for a figure in the corner, hunched and praying in whispers. You step around him quietly and approach the altar, where something gleams beneath a sheet of glass. A bone, pale, smooth, polished by time and touch. A fragment of someone who mattered. A label, faded and curling. Saint Aurelius, protector against pestilence. You kneel without quite knowing why. They say relics like this hold power, that the bones of saints remember things the body forgot, how to endure, how to protect, how to remain when everything else has fled. People have made pilgrimages to kneel right here, just as you do now, whispering names into the silence. Not their own names, but others. You whisper one too. Historians still argue whether the veneration of relics during plague years was theological, psychological, or theatrical. But kneeling here, forehead near bone, you understand. Sometimes it's not about belief. It's about needing to. A candle flickers. Someone just whispered your name. A priest appears from the back, robes plain and eyes kind. He carries a silver thurible swinging from a chain. Smoke rises, frankincense and pine resin, thick and slow. He says nothing, but stands beside you as if to lend the silence weight. You ask him if it works. He doesn't answer at first. Then softly, "The saints do not stop the sickness, but they carry it." He gestures to a glass case near the wall. Inside, more relics. A finger bone wrapped in silk. A cracked wooden tooth. A piece of scapular stained dark with oil from centuries of touch. You almost forget which century this is. He leads you to a side alcove where a woman lays small tokens on a stone shelf. A comb, a doll, a dried apple. You ask what they are. "Prayers made solid," she says, "so they can't drift away." You offer the muslin sachet from the widow, placing it gently beside the doll. The priest nods. "You've made a prayer now," he says, "whether you meant to or not." The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. Before you leave, the priest hands you a small wax disc. Pressed into its surface is a faint image. A hand touching another hand. No writing. Just that. He says, "Melt it when you feel furthest from others. Let the warmth remind you that someone is still touching you." That night, you light it. The wax softens slowly. The scent is honey and ash. You hold your fingers above it, close enough to feel, but not close enough to burn. A bell rings again, softer this time, and you breathe in. Not because you're cured, but because you've remembered how. You find him sitting in the cloister's garden, beneath a tree that's long outlived its name. The bark is soft with lichen. The leaves above rustle gently, though there's no wind. He wears no mask now, just a wool cloak, heavy at the shoulders, and gloves he doesn't remove. His eyes are watery, but sharp, set deep into a face that's forgotten how to smile. A beak-like mask lies on the bench beside him, split at the seam, one eye lens missing. Dried lavender still clings to the inside. He doesn't look up when you approach. "You're late," he says. Everyone else left early. You sit beside him. The silence between you is filled by the flutter of birds overhead and the soft creak of the wooden bench, warping with age. He speaks again, voice dry. Do you know how many people I cured? You don't answer. None, he says. But I wrote very convincing reports. You glance at his hands. They tremble slightly, not from cold, but from memory. He picks up the mask and turns it in his lap. We thought we understood. We had Galen. We had logic. We had charts. He sighs. And yet, the air did not listen. Historians still argue whether the plague doctors were heroes or figureheads, trained professionals or men hired to wear fear like armor. But this one has seen too much to pretend anymore. A dog barks in the distance. You keep walking. I bled them, he continues. I burned them. I buried more than I recorded. And then I walked home every night with herbs stuffed in my collar, pretending the stench of death couldn't climb higher than rosemary. He smiles bitterly. I knew better. You ask why he kept going. He shrugs. What else was there to do? A candle flickers. Someone just whispered your name. He shows you a notebook. Its pages are thin and brittle, covered in a neat, looping script that grows shakier toward the end. Drawings of lungs, notes on buboes, a list of scents and their supposed properties. Clove for courage, juniper for the soul, mint for clarity. On one page, a poem. I stood where others fled. I listened when none spoke. I wore the bird, but it did not fly. He closes the book gently. I thought the mask would make me something more than a man, something untouchable, but it only muffled the sound of the dying. You almost forget which century this is. You ask if he regrets it. He looks at you, eyes suddenly wet. I regret surviving more than failing, because I still hear them. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. Before you go, he gives you something wrapped in cloth. You unwrap it later, alone. Inside, a single glove, stained at the fingers. Tucked within, a sprig of dried marjoram and a folded note. If the mask did nothing else, it let them believe I was trying. Let them believe something watched over them, even if it blinked. That night, you place the glove on your bedside table, not as protection, as witness. A bell rings again, softer this time, and the wind smells faintly of herbs, an apology. The road narrows as you climb the hill, bordered by hedges too well kept for a place abandoned. Birds still sing here, strangely bold. The sky, for once, isn't gray but a pale, forgiving blue. You crest the ridge, and there it is. A village, untouched. The thatch on the roofs is golden, not blackened. Window shutters hang straight. Gardens bloom with late summer greens. And most of all, no bells, no smoke, no silence pretending not to grieve. You pause, then you walk forward, slowly, unsure if you're dreaming. A woman greets you at the edge of town, a basket on her arm and a scarf around her mouth. Not tight, not fearful, just careful. You're not one of ours, she says, but you're welcome, if you follow the rule. You ask what the rule is. She points to a wooden post at the crossroads, carved into the grain. No one enters, no one leaves. Not for 40 days, not for pity, not for trade, not for love. You glance back the way you came. I didn't pass a guard, you say. She nods. We don't need one. We've all agreed. Historians still argue whether these closed villages truly escaped the plague, or if they simply wrote the ending differently. But as you walk the cobbled streets, you see something you haven't seen in weeks. People smiling. Not wide, not careless, but real. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. A boy shows you how they trade. Baskets of goods left at the stone ring outside town. Payment in coin or kind collected with tongs and gloves. Soap made in copper pots. Vinegar boiled daily. Fire pits on every corner. A curfew not enforced by soldiers, but by song. The villagers sing as they close shutters, each note a kind of lock. A bell rings again, softer this time. But here, it's for supper, not sorrow. You sit with them that evening in a courtyard lit by oil lamps and careful hope. Bread is passed in silence. A girl plays a lute. Someone pours wine, strong, dark, earthy. You ask if they've lost anyone. An old man raises his glass. "Not yet," he says, "and that is enough." You ask what they miss. "The river," someone murmurs. "The market. Letters from my sister." "And touch," says another. "But we chose distance so that no one would have to choose mourning." You almost forget which century this is. Before you sleep, you visit the chapel. It's small, stone and thatch, flowers on the windowsill. On the altar, no relics, no icons. Just a single candle and a slate with a word etched simply, "Still." That night you dream of the village continuing forever, growing inward, not outward. No gates, no plague, just the memory of how close everything came to ending, and the decision not to let it. The breeze shifts. A torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. You wake before dawn and take one last look at the path behind you. But you do not walk it. Not yet. A bell rings again. Not sharp, not frantic. Just a soft, familiar chime. And this time, you do not flinch. You walk through the street as light spills between shuttered windows. The city is not whole. Too many doors still wear the cross. Too many beds still sag in silence. But something has shifted. The plague is not gone. But neither are you. You pass the butcher's stall, now scrubbed clean, a basket of onions resting where a cleaver once sat. The baker hums a tune you remember, soft and slow, as she slides loaves into a soot-darkened oven. The market smells of thyme and vinegar, yes, but also something brighter. Lavender, rosemary, and memory. You almost forget which century this is. The mask returns. You see it before you hear it. That strange silhouette, long-beaked and ghostly, gliding down the alley like an old superstition made flesh. But this time, it does not bring dread. It brings recognition. A reminder of what was survived. He walks slowly, as always, each step measured, not in fear, but in ritual. You nod as he passes. He nods back. No words, just breath behind linen, just eyes behind glass. You remember now. He never promised a cure, only presence. The silence is heavier now. You move through it like smoke. You reach the chapel square again. The fresco is finished. Skeletons still dancing, yes, but now with new additions. A nurse holding hands with death, a child offering a garland to a skull, a plague doctor with one glove off, reaching for the light. Someone's written beneath it. We kept moving, even when the music stopped. You sit at the fountain. It's working again. A slow trickle, cold, clean. And you remember everything. The herbs burned in gutters, the gold leaf in noble goblets, the surgeon's hidden drawer, the widow's lullaby, the whisper behind the chapel wall. You inhale, not because the air is safe, but because it is yours. You are still here. The breeze shifts. A torch crackles. You're still there, just deeper in the moment. And as the sky softens to dawn, you feel a new stillness. Not the stillness of fear, but the quiet that follows when something ancient finally exhales. You stand. Not because there is nothing more to fear, but because, somehow, you know how to walk again. The smallest gestures can carry the loudest histories. A clove of garlic tucked into a sleeve. A cat's sudden absence from a windowsill. A widow humming to a jar of nutmeg and vinegar. Each one, part memory, part medicine. And now, at the edge of sleep, where thought turns to fog and time loosens its grip, you may rest with that knowing. Nothing more is needed. No decree, No ceremony, just the quiet, familiar weight of change. In the shape of a beaked mask, a wilted herb, a prayer murmured into empty rooms. And still, something stirs. Not plague, not fear, but the deep, green root of hope. Not because the world was spared, but because you are still here. And if history whispers tonight, it does so gently, with lavender on its breath. End of script. Sweet dreams.